My gosh, I was muted. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Wellness Wednesdays. It is August 16th, 2023. I am your host, Tyrone E. Wilson. I have a thing for providing educational mental health talks, panels, what have you. I always like to begin with myself and tell my story. So, I would never ask anyone to speak. Uh, something about them without me doing it myself. So if you've seen me of any of my videos, there's an entire playlist of me talking about me. And the goal is to normalize not necessarily mental issues, but the fact that, things may have affected you. Things may have occurred in the past that have effect on you today. And you're not okay with that. It's totally fine for you to not be okay. We do have some guests with me tonight. My good friend Brandon Robinson and with that, Johan. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Hey,
So
good
what I
evening.
wanted to what I wanted to do tonight, and welcome everyone that's in the audience tonight. What I want to do tonight is we've had panels of men, we've had panels with women, but I want to dedicate tonight's show to the youth. Right. So one of the things that I want to focus on is addressing the fact that there are youngsters out there, those younger than us, that are going through things as well. So it's not just always an adult men's panel. I want them to know that, they are seen, you are here, you live amongst this earth with us. And obviously, there are things that you're going through as well. And that's okay. I will do all I can to ensure that, you hear the word, you get your answers, your questions answered, and even some resources that you need. Before we do that, though, I always like to start off, with the panel telling a little bit about themselves first. Everyone knows me, so Brandon and then Johan, you go really, really quick. Let the crowd know who you are and what you do.
All right, sure. Let me know if you can hear me because I'm trying my
Yeah, yeah,
headphones. So,
yeah.
okay, we good. All right, cool. So yeah, I'm Brandon Robinson. First and foremost, I'm an author. My brand is When Words When Form. So I focus a lot on mental health and also happen to work in cybersecurity. That's I mean tie connected. So I'm a sales engineer. I do a lot around zero trust, etc. So that's me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ty. Again, my name is Johan. I'm a mortgage consultant, a mortgage broker out in Colorado. Mental health fanatic, and all about that, and all about the conversation. So I'm always down to join in and have conversations like this.
Cool, cool, cool. So, one of the things that I wanted to start with is I always like for um, the panel just to kind of explain something briefly that may be plaguing them right now, right? It's not to go in depth, it's just so everyone that's listening can find some common ground and see that, you know, we're not perfect and those on the panel may be going through something as well. So I'm going to start myself. Um, I have been trying to figure out this depression thing lately. Um, not, I wouldn't necessarily call it full out depression, but I noticed that there is something off, and it's almost like I can't find my timing. Like there's certain parts of the day where I'm used to being energized and I'm not. You know, sometimes when I do some research, they attribute it to maybe a little bit of ADHD and also some of the things that um, you're getting up for don't exactly move you or motivate you enough to do that, right? So some people like to work under pressure. I enjoy working under pressure. So when things come easy, like work, the job, um, I don't really feel as motivated. And I notice that when it's time to go to the gym, I'm amped. When it's time to go for a walk, I'm amped. When it's time to come on the panel, I'm amped. But I catch myself taking power naps. So I am working on that. And it feels like there's a bunch of browser windows open that's taking up this processing space in my head. And I need to figure out which one of them I need to close. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. What about you, Brandon?
Yeah, I'm I actually started researching for a therapist.
Okay.
So I'm about to go back to therapy. I took some time off. So I think for me, I'm in a space where I just want to um I want to have like a safe space to unpack a lot of stuff. Like there are a lot of things like I like to delve into, like childhood trauma, etc. Like things I see in myself, things that I've been working on, right? Like that I experienced. And, I think having another voice, another me to talk to, right? Like I can talk to myself, first and foremost, I don't, I learned how to create a safe environment in myself, right? Once I found out about the concept of self abandonment, right? Like, how do I grow in those things? So I think like a therapist is having that person to unpack that stuff, and somebody who's probably more versed in it even than me, right, will help.
Yeah, that's all good stuff, man. I think for me right now, my therapist actually we just had another anniversary, and we were talking about it because it was very awkward. I was telling her like outside of my friends and family, she's the only woman I had a long-term relationship with, the longest. And but it kind of like really put one thing in perspective for me, the fact that I was struggling with those power naps where I wasn't really like hemmed up about doing certain things, so like it really put in perspective my journey to mental health and like how far I've come, um, so it's been for me more of a journey of like awareness, being more aware about like how my therapist, like talking to someone, has been like part of my lifestyle now, and not necessarily something that I'm using as like a crisis solution, but now it's like something I get to do.
Yeah, I like the fact that you two mentioned therapists. I want to put a and then the fact that you mentioned it so openly and so freely. I want to put a pin on that when we start talking about resources later. But Johan, you talked about your journey. My next question would be, and since tonight's show is dedicated to the youth, I want to know like how young were you, when you first realized that you may be going through something mentally?
Oh man, that's a good question. I would say I didn't really like start looking at it until like I started like so man, I was probably about I'm 35 now, so I was probably about 25 when I lost my dad um about 10 years ago. That was kind of like the moment where my whole kind of like world flipped upside down. So it really like took something that dramatic. And then after that, I went through a divorce and I went back in there. And I've been very vocal on any platform I've been on about, me going through a breakup last year. So I've also like, I was already in therapy there. So I would say really, um, it took a traumatic experience and like I was 25 when it happened. Like when I started talking to someone, but I've been in and out of there. So that's why I didn't want to count that moment 10 years ago. But that was the moment where I really like started being more aware of like my mental health and learning that, the conversation I have in my head is something very important.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple things that kind of triggered me. One was the awareness and actually doing the research. I realized at 40 that I had issues when I was 18, 19 years old. But at the time, I was so numb, I didn't think there was anything wrong. But now that I look back, I say to myself, man, I was pretty troubled, to the fact. where I created a whole entire alter ego for myself to
Yeah.
make myself feel better, to make myself feel loved, to make myself feel confident, to make myself feel validated. And now that I look back on it, I realize, you know, it's the equivalent to someone that is that has created an alternate persona to kind of take the pain away, to take those feelings of abuse away. And when I look at it, I'm like, wow, like I was really down. But what was weird is that I felt like I was enjoying life, but I realized that all of my relationships were failing because of these compensating controls that I was putting in on my life. And it wasn't until I figured all that part out that I learned how to have, a halfway decent relationship. What about you, Brandon?
Man, I think similar to you, man. I think like at 17 or 8, no, 17, 16, I kind of knew like some of this not normal. Like what I'm feeling, and I'm like, but I didn't really act on it too much later. But because I grew up in, you grew up in Detroit, like my boy got killed in the drive-by, like that was like different. Like we was just with each other the week before. This is like my crew, our block, we hung out, and I'm like, dang, he gone, like he really gone, right? Like, and I held on to the rose. I don't think I really talked about this publicly. I held on to that rose, man, from his funeral for like a year and change. Like it was like dead in the drawer. But to me, it's like this all I got left of him. You know what I'm saying? So like stuff like that, that was my junior year. Like stuff like that and other stuff prior to that had already kind of shifted me and changed me. And I grew up like, in the hood, so you hear like gunshots and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't, much like you, Ty. I didn't act on fixing it probably until like I got older because nobody told me like there's an option to talk to anybody, right? Like I didn't know we could talk to people. I actually ended up in like religion and finding church. Like that was kind of my saving grace until I got to therapy, right? Like that was kind of the thing that would anchor me. Was like I found like the church, and it helped me, right? It helped me, make some better decisions, put myself on a better path, and then eventually I found like the mental health path.
Wow. If y'all see me choking, it's my anxiety. I definitely know what it is right now. Another,
I wanted to
yeah, go
ask
ahead.
you guys. I wanted to ask you guys a question because
Sure.
it sounds like our introduction to whether therapy or like the importance of like mental health was kind of like something that you guys experienced the trauma earlier, but you did not start acting on it later. Um, why do you think there was that gap in between? Because for me, I was never aware of those things in my teens until my behavior started affecting people around me, where I was like, okay, I need to like do something about why I'm reacting this way, you know. Um, but
Ty,
for
you go
No,
first.
the same
yeah,
year, the trauma started happening essentially.
yeah. I'll go first. Like I've always been really strong-minded. I've never given into like peer pressure or anything to like smoke, drugs, gangs, trouble that all my friends was getting into. I was always like the smart, strong-minded one. But, you saw me like during the show, and I started seeing some of the comments in the show talking about me looking crazy. Then I saw the comments about people thinking, that I have mental issues and stuff. So in my mind, I felt like maybe it took something so extreme in nature that way for me to be on TV, for me to actually take a step back and be like, man, like, what is it? So one of my good friends actually sent me a couple of videos about how your upbringing affects your relationship style.
Mm,
So that's when I started learning about what my attachment style was. And then after doing research on my attachment style, then it hit me. I was like, maybe I do have daddy issues, you know, maybe I do have mommy issues. And, there were some things that you heard me say on the show that I felt like I needed to address. There's some things that I tweeted, you know, and then someone responded to me, was like, hey, you need to go and fix that. So I drove out the next day. I spent a week with my mom, and, and I'm going to post it soon, but I actually went on a journey to go and find my biological father. Um, I still don't think I've forgiven him, but, I made a post on my IG saying that, I understand how it is, and I'm not going to let that get to me anymore. And from that point on, I feel like, the self, the validation that I was seeking out, I felt like I didn't need it anymore. And it really, really changed my life. It really did.
That's a really good answer. I would say, there are a few reasons why it took me so long. One, because like we didn't know about therapy. Like that was like when I grew up, like I'm 40, like Ty, we not too distant in age. So I'm like 42. So um nobody really like I had never even heard of therapy. Like in middle school, high school, none of that. Like I went to school in Detroit. Like I'm not saying like I knew you had like a counselor, but I never knew of the concept of therapy. And then honestly, if I'm being truthful, the reason I never really addressed it is because where I grew up at, I never planned to make it past 21. So I always said like I won't be here long, so it doesn't really matter. So once I hit past 21, I was like, oh crap, I actually got to do something. Like this messed up my whole plan, or what I thought, because that's what I saw. So that's
Yeah,
that's that's my answer.
I think that's very it's very telling because Ty, you wanted to talk about the youth tonight. For
Mhm.
me, the reason why I asked that question, it was more about like also understanding how here in the US, because I've been here for 10 years. So for me it's like always educating myself on like the challenges that like the African American youth is like going through. I do work with the youth in my city, and I'm always having conversation with my junior high brothers, senior, and like I have conversations with them on Saturdays, and none of them really had conversation with their parents about the way they think, the way they feel. Like they did not really like express how they felt for a long time until we started this program a few years back. So for me it's like, what are the things that like we've been missing out on? So I just thought I would ask that question because it sounds like now the older we are, the better we are at maneuvering like mental health and all that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. When we were young, we kind of prided ourselves on being the toughest family, you know, in the neighborhood. It was a lot of us. We was all fighting each other. We all knew how to fight, and it was like we needed the world to know not to mess with nobody in the family. But that also meant that amongst ourselves, we weren't allowed to be soft. We weren't allowed to cry. They would be like, "You crying? Like, are you like?" And I remember literally torturing my brother, being like, "I wish you would cry." You know, like I wish you would cry. Like it's going. These beatings will continue. But I wasn't realizing what negative impact that could cause. So what I started doing was there was a different generation, like with my nephew, you know. And it's funny that I'm saying this with my nephew, he's able to be a little bit more vulnerable, but I somehow still feel like that generation is softer. And I know I shouldn't be I know I shouldn't be saying that, right? I know I shouldn't be saying that, but it's just, it's just kind of how I feel. Like, um, you ever see that meme where it says the parents are working really, really hard to have the kids have a better life. And then when the kids have a better life, now the parents are all mad because they think that, they're soft and lazy and all that. So it's almost just like that. Um, I'm working on that. I've been trying to let my family members know that, they can talk about those things. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel pain. Embrace it and then move on. You had mentioned the youth again, and I have family members that I know have been through a lot more than me. Um, Brandon had mentioned death earlier. Um, we just got a call today. Um, my little cousins, their friends, they lost count. So I can't imagine some of the things that they have to go through. And I've been deployed twice, and they've seen a whole lot more death than me. But I feel
Wow.
like there's not enough resources out there. Johan, you mentioned, having those conversations. I applaud you for having those conversations. But other than some of the things that I mentioned, I want you all to give some examples on what, as adults, we feel the youth may be experiencing that would have a negative impact. Just so if they're listening right now, I want them to know that, they can feel heard.
Brendan, I'll let you go first.
Okay, I was about to defer to you. Um, so what I would say is honestly listen to them. Listening first and foremost. I think the greatest act that you could do is listen to the youth. Like when you're sitting with them, listen to them. Like I used to coach football, um, so I did it for years, right? And I also did some mentoring like around the football thing too. So I would just sit and talk to them and listen to them, right? And the more you listen to them, you would understand some of the challenges they face. Like it's a little different than us. A lot of them come from like single parent homes, so that's like really the majority. But not only that, like like a lot of them are like raising like they're babysitting, kids, or they gotta like provide for the home, or I seen like a mom ask her son for gas money one time. Like I was like, this is really different. Social media is also another thing. Like they everything they do is recorded and then broadcasted to so many people. So it's just a different kind of vector, right? Where all of your everything's magnified, right? And everything's on the gram, everything's on Snap. So that's a different challenge. I mean, we didn't have that. Like if we did something, um, whether it was fighting or say you sleep with a girl or something like that, that was just hearsay. Like, but now it's on Snap. Now people posting pictures. That has a much greater impact. So I think those are some of the things that they face.
Yeah, and Ty, your question was about like what are some of the influences they are having, or like what are some of the things they can do to improve their mental health?
No, I meant like I don't want them to feel like we live in two different worlds, right? I want them
Hmm.
to understand that we are aware of some of the things that they are going through. So just kind of wanted us to call that out.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I think it's important to like have a conversation with the younger ones that are thinking that they should be, whether tough or hard. You were just talking about the whole story about like, when we were growing up, crying wasn't like something that we were allowed. I'm not gonna lie to you, man. That's like a black people thing. Because I grew up thousands and thousands of miles away from y'all, and we were not allowed to cry either. So it's not like, for me, it's like just like the survival mentality that we always had about those things. And because there's that whole, stop crying, otherwise I'm going to give you something to cry about. Like we all feel like we've been all raised by the same black mom, right? Because
Hmm.
that's just the way we all wired. It's
Yeah.
just really the same way. And I'm going to tell you guys this quick story. At the ministry that I serve with the youth, we were having a circle where we were just having conversation. And I was standing between two young brothers. I think the oldest one is 13, the oldest one is 16. I've known them since they were like, under 10 years old. And the guy who was speaking, a friend of mine, was like, you got to hug your friend next to you. And they didn't want to hug each other, and they shared the same room. And I was like, why aren't you guys hugging? They're like, no, we cool. I'm like, no, we're going to hug. We're going to do a group hug. And I tried to do the group hug with them. And the oldest one was kind of like pushing me off, like, okay, we already did the hug. It's all good. And I'm like, dude, we didn't do the hug right. He's like, yeah, but we already did the. And he started talking to me about the fact that he was dunking the ball when we were playing the game. And I was like, but what does that have to do with the hug? And he couldn't put that in perspective. But when I sat down with him and had a conversation, what he was trying to tell me is that you started play basketball with me when I couldn't dunk the ball. Now I could dunk the ball. Now I'm a man. You're not going to tell me I got to hug my brother. So for him, becoming a man, we're like less showing their emotion. And I had to show him from a tender heart as his big brother. I was like, man, I just wanted to get a hug from you, man. And it put him really uncomfortable because he thought I was going to come across as like, you know what, go over there with your hug. But I opened up myself to him and say, hey, man, I just wanted a hug. Your brother just wanted a hug. So I think that the conversation should really shift to like expressing how we feel about them, how proud we are of them, how we cherish them. So they are not necessarily like minimizing, the youth that they have. But yeah, it's just always like that I be thinking about.
You know what? It's funny you say that. It took me almost 40 years to get comfortable saying I love you, to my brother and sister, just at the end of phone conversations. Or just something simple like, hey, make sure you let me know you made it home. And I'm realizing that we're doing that a lot more, and it's subconsciously making us a lot stronger family. So that is a very, very good point.
Yeah, it's like we love each other, but we don't necessarily like to say, well, we love you, because we've always seen showing love as like a sign of like humility, as a sign of like, bowing down to somebody. So it's more like, okay, if I say I love you, it's like I'm showing you I'm soft and everything. And I tell my son every day I love him. When we get off the phone, when he calls me, just out of nowhere, he be just saying like, hey, Papa, I love you. And I'm like, what do you love me about, bro? I just gave you dinner, But like, I giving that to him because I grew up in a house with brothers and sisters where that word was not coming often, It was tough, man. I never heard I love you from my siblings or my brother for a long time, but I knew they loved me.
They just beat up. Like we would get beat up. Like when I go visit my family in Florida, they would beat me up before they even dap me up. We would get the beat down. Just we gotta make sure you're still tough. All right. What's good? Good to see you. I got another question for y'all. Now I hope I word this right. And for anyone in the audience, if you have any answers to this question, please provide something that you feel could be a good response. So my question for Johan and Brandon is, sometimes, when we're younger, we don't realize that there's something, that's affecting us. Like I literally admitted that I didn't realize it until I turned 40. So my question is, what are some things that could occur with you that are a general, I'm saying it right, that is it's a general representation that something is negatively affecting you? I know there's anger outbursts. There could be things like you are breaking stuff. You're now yelling at people. You're, things like that. What are some other examples that could let a person know that something could be affecting them, and it's probably time to talk to someone?
Like, what are some signs or indicators that we
Yeah, so
have
some
or had?
yeah, so sometimes kids
Okay.
don't know that they need to talk to someone. They
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know
Okay.
that you know, that they're going through like a mental, I don't want to even call it a crisis because I don't want it to sound negative, but
Yeah.
what are some of
That
those
it's a
indicators?
shift in their emotional makeup. Yeah. Well,
When you
since I went first last time,
yeah,
I would
all
say
you, my good brother.
I would say for me, generally when I'm realizing that and I always take example with my son, right? He's 8 years old. He's a boy who's like very expressive about himself and things about life, but he's not always, the person who's gonna really tell you how he feels because he's a people pleaser, and that's something I know, I'm gonna have to develop in him to like always learn that you need a voice. Um, I think that like some of the sign that you can really notice is like how they're reacting to what you are telling them to do. Really pay attention to the facial expression, um, because when they don't really like say anything when you tell them to do something,
yo,
what
huh.
I'm,
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm talking from the kid's point of view. How
oh,
does a kid know that there's something affecting them possibly?
oh, how can the kid know that something is affecting them? Man, that's a good question. That's it. Well, that's a deeper perspective. I would say um, I can remember my time where I wasn't really as social as I was generally. Like withdrawing myself from a loved one was always a sign that I needed to like think more about what was going through my head. So definitely like creating distance with your loved one should be a sign for you to really like check in with yourself and ask yourself, how do you feel? It could be the fact that every time you're hanging out with your siblings, they're making jokes about you. So now, you're pulling away from that. So that silence is generally something that you really have to ask yourself about. Also, lack of motivation in doing certain things that you always enjoy. It doesn't have to be something that you did with your friends or family, but just like simple thing as like playing basketball, riding your bike around, playing Fortnite, things that you generally enjoy, and also just having mood swings. Just being short with your parents. Some of the youth have great relationship with the parents, and they always listen. And I feel like when they are struggling, they tend to be really moody with their parents, and that's something that the kids can definitely pay attention to. What do you think, Brendan?
Yeah. First of all, I think you gave some really good answers, and I agree. My train of thought is on one of the ones one of the ones you hit on. I think that one of the things that lets them know that they're not okay is when they're not doing things that they do normally, right? Like you have like customs, habits. Like if you got an outgoing, joyful kid, if he or she feels, less outgoing, less joyful, less interactive with people, right? And they don't actually know why. Like that's going probably the biggest thing is they're not going to know, like to dive in to dig in, right? Like, and your son is blessed to have a father who'll do that work with him, and so that's an indicator of I may need to talk to somebody. Or like you said, like when you start to lose interest in like your hobbies, like things that you really love to do. Like you may have like a kid that loves playing sports, loves playing video games, or loves baking, loves doing whatever. The moment that they find no, like they seem more disinterested in that stuff, and they're just kind of like blah, that's a sign inside of them. And especially if it's consistently happening, like over a period of time, that like, all right, something is going on inside of me. I don't quite know what, but maybe I can talk to somebody to say, I don't really feel like myself. And that's when having a great relationship with first your parents comes in, because they'll also probably pick up on they're not really themselves, but maybe they were giving you the space to kind of like talk to them about it. Then you can kind of like help them navigate through and start to explore like let's find out what's exactly going on.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. There are some things now that I think back on my youth, like when there were times where I would much rather stay in the house for a couple days, where I'd much rather just get some food and watch TV and just lay there all day, in my comfort zone of just being by myself. I'd say by day 2, day 3, especially now, now I would say, yeah, there's something up. You know, what could I possibly be depressed about? What is on my mind right now that I feel like I can't change?
Mhm.
You know, what is something that I'm thinking about? Remember when I talked about those browser windows being open? What is one of those browser windows that's open right now that I could put a pin on and close? You know,
So Ty,
and
can I ask you a quick
Mhm.
question real quick
Yeah, sure, sure,
about
sure.
your answer? Personality type, are you more introverted or extroverted?
I was very, as a youth, I was very introverted.
Okay.
Now I'm an extrovert when I need to be.
Okay.
Like
So it's balanced
now,
then.
yeah, when I give a presentation, um,
Hmm.
I'm fine, but it takes a lot out of me.
Okay. So how,
Yeah.
what part of you like, and we didn't know, and sorry to hijack your answer, but I just figured this would be great for the kids to explore. How much do you think understanding your personality type can help play into knowing when something's bothering you versus like this is just my personality type? How do you decipher between the two?
You know what? That's a good question. And I was also thinking, you know, just the trials and tribulations of being a kid. Like, how do you know you're just
Mm,
angry at something because you're a kid and you just don't agree with it? You just don't understand it just
yes.
yet, you know? But I
Mhm,
think that does play a really big role. If you're naturally introverted, there's things that you're naturally not going to do. But I do
mhm,
feel like you have an understanding of what your normal routine is.
mm,
You have an understanding of some of the things that you look forward to, on a
mhm.
certain day at a certain time. Maybe it's a show that you
Mhm.
like to watch that
Yeah.
is not of interest anymore, but like Martin come on Thursday nights, you know.
Absolutely. Yes.
So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
there, and if I'm not there, like, okay, something's up. And if, you know, what's another one? Like, if you're really for the most part, a nice, non-violent person, but you
Mhm.
see yourself throwing stuff and kicking stuff in the room, or even if it's just something simple like throwing your pillow, that is an outburst. Even if it's a
Yeah.
controlled outburst,
That's
it's
true.
still an outburst. So I think you have an idea. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Ty, one thing I wanted to add though is, as we talking about the youth, we also gotta understand that 19, 20, 21 is still young, right?
Mhm.
So being on a platform like being on YouTube, you do have a lot of people around that age group that are essentially out of high school, going to college or getting out of college. They're essentially also following your platform. And
Mhm.
I feel like in some of the answers we provided, we're kind of like limiting that age group to like younger. And
Mhm.
one thing I would say about the importance about why I'm bringing that age group is because with thinking that this is your personality is sometimes dictating based on the environment that you're in. So I take my example. I grew up around a lot of women, my sisters, my cousins, and I always thought like women did not like me, but I thought it, but it was just my sister and my cousin that didn't like me because even to this day, they still call me ugly, and I didn't do nothing to them. I'm not doing anything. I'm just calling them, and they're like, "Well, you still ugly." So it's like you gotta like also as we think about mental health around that age group, it's very important to find an identity, find who you are, right? Always seeking the internal comfort about the conversation that you're having with yourself, regardless of the group of friends that you hang around, regardless of the kind of hobbies that you have. It's very important to tap in with your true self because once you know about those things, it's easier to also understand, okay, maybe it's time for me to talk to somebody because I'm having mood swing, I'm picking up fights at school and everything else. So I didn't want to to forget about that age group for sure, but you know
Johan,
That's a good point.
thanks for helping me with that transition, man. Thanks for
Yeah,
helping me
no,
out.
you're good.
Because
You're good.
no, because the very next thing I was gonna say is, now that we've identified it, we understand what our triggers are. What is now a really good way to transition from getting a better understanding of that to seeking guidance or help, constructional instru- ah, constructional criticism, things of that nature, in a way that you would still feel safe. If that's a good way to put it.
Hmm.
I know
Yeah,
Brandon got an answer.
I was like, man, that's a pretty good one. Then you get to feel safe, and I'm like, um, yeah, I think here. So for people of all ages, but especially that 17, 18, 19 range, like this is a scary time, right? Because especially in the States, right? Everybody's asking, what are you doing with your life? Like, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And you're like, dude, I just want to go to sleep, or I just want to do X, Y, and Z, right? Like, so, like, there's a tremendous amount of pressure that we put on these people. But outside of that, like, what I'd say is your question is like avenues. How do we create safety? you know, One of the things I'm always an advocate of, first and foremost, is journaling, right? Like journaling is the first place where you get to know yourself. It's the safest space, right? Where you can just create this, first of all, the space of being safe with yourself, right? Because vulnerability only works if we're vulnerable with ourselves. If we can't be honest and delve into and explore like different areas and different emotional cavities inside of ourselves, right? And allow us to hear the real answer, right? Like you said, your true self, right? Like, so you have to allow your true self, like, because there's so many voices that will have tried to influence and shape us. We have to know and start to distinguish between this is everybody else's voice, but here's my voice, here's my true voice, right? And obviously, some of that comes from parenting and et cetera, and environment, right? So I say journaling is where I'd start. I think that's the first and foremost, and then I'll kick it over so I don't hold the mic.
Yeah. So the question was about like this, how they can build a safe space, or
No,
like,
how do you transition from identifying your triggers and being like, okay, I'm finally realizing that something may be affecting me. Like,
mhm.
how did they transition from that to actually getting help and being better?
I would say anything that you feel like is uncommon or not, like that's like not normal about you, find the opportunity to talk to your school counselor. I think that a lot of us undervalue the resources that we have, around us, and depending on what they are. And I'm going with a school counselor because sometime at home, it's not always safe to having expression about like going through a very tough year at school, and now you having some symptom like somebody mentioned in a comment bedwetting, and all this stuff. So I would say like leaning on your resources is important. So it could be the people at school, it could be any older siblings that you trust with those kind of conversation. But at the same time, journaling is also very okay. Um, but the thing I'm reading this book right now, and he's talking about how we process our emotion. Will you whether suppress them, repress them, or we escape them? And I think that at a certain age, we don't always have the ability to like know how to handle it one way or the other. And I think that a lot of youth, what they do, they're escaping for years and years until they get to the 40s, right? They're all pointing fingers and realizing like I've been escaping those things my whole life. So for me, it's kind of like a challenge to like answer that question all the way, besides just having to lean on your environment, because at that age, it's very tough to like be able to maneuver everything on your own, because otherwise you start replacing being around people because you think you're an introvert. Now you're spending all your days in your room on social media comparing your life to other kids, and now you're developing, imposter syndrome. which leads to comparing your life to other kids. And, youth suicide is real. And some of that comes from, social media outlets. So using your resources, having conversation with the people that you trust and you love are definitely going to help, because out of all those people that love and you trust, there's going to be people that are going to be able to listen to you and help you navigate your emotion. Because that's another best way outside of journaling, like Brendan said.
Okay. I want to move on to the next age bracket, because I literally just spent the weekend with my nephew. He's 25, and I really was listening to him. He may not know it, but I was really listening to him. And he started expressing some of the emotions that I remember feeling. And one of the questions he was asking me was like, how do I get there? Because he's at a point to where he's aware of success. He's starting to see more successful people. But, a lot of the people his age are just at a point where, they made it through high school. Probably junior, senior year of high school is probably the worst, because now they're thinking about college. Probably barely made it through college, but they made it through college. Finally got their first few jobs, and now they're probably thinking to themselves like, "Is this my life?" Like, how do I make that transition from like what I'm doing right now, to what I'm seeing the older adults have with homes and cars and the nice things and all this, and I see him with that, and sometimes a kid just don't want to hear put in the work, put in the work. It's not going to be easy, because I hate when people say that to me. What would you say, to a young adult asking that question?
I'll go first. So I think for me, and I'm smiling, right? The reason why I'm smiling is because in the ministry that I work with, that's the transition that I'm working on with my guys. Okay, I have a group of eight boys. They're between the age of 16, 17, all the way to 21. And the conversation that we are having is a lot more about life after college, life after high school. And one thing that I'm always doing is trying to put role models in front of them, because when you see one, when you see somebody do something that you really like you are a role model in his life, Ty. And I'm pretty sure that he looks up to you so much, because think about what you are able to accomplish. You're a black man who's very open and vocal about your mental health journey. Your romantic life was out there on TV, so we already know a few things about you. He knows about that accomplishment doesn't come easy because you serve in the military. He also comes that it knows that vulnerability comes with strength because you're vocal about your mental health, right? And then you also know that when it comes down to the matter of the heart with the ladies, you got to be vulnerable because you expose yourself on TV. So I think that having people that essentially are always around those young adult, whether it's women or young men, is very important. But healthy examples and people that you wish that you could become 10 years from now. I think that's the very important part that the youth can do, is like just spend some time with your OGs. There's nothing wrong with that, you know?
No, those are good
You
points.
want me to go before Brandon crushes it right now?
I didn't
Go
know.
ahead, Ty.
I
I
didn't
know
Go
know
he's
ahead,
gonna
Ty.
crush it.
this was,
I,
man.
I'll
Go
tell
ahead,
you
Ty.
one of the things that was very, very difficult for me, because I remember feeling like this can't be my life. But I always had the confidence in myself that it was going to turn. I'm going to turn the corner eventually. So it wasn't easy, but being patient was for me a requirement. I remember having that feeling like, no, like I want all that now, you know. But I had to remind myself that, if I don't have it now, one, it's because either I'm not supposed to have it now, or I'm just not ready to have it now. And there were times where I had it and wasn't ready, and ended up losing it. And then the time that I lost it is when I was at the lowest point of my life. And I remember taking a picture, and I was looking around, and I remember having a chuckle to myself saying, yo, this is the lowest point of my life right now. And I remember taking some pictures, and I remember saying to myself, okay, so what are you going to do about it? And then, like, everything changed. So, um, if it was me, I would say just remember to be patient. Everybody's journey is different. Definitely hang out with the OGs, like Johan said. I do have some mentors. A lot of them, most of them, are doing a lot better than I am, right? So they are my motivation. They give me guidance. I accept their guidance. Um, they keep me humble. When I do start to, you know, when I do start to come up a little bit. So that's also good. Things that I need. And you know, if there was one more thing, I would be like, don't hate on other people that are shining. You know, because one, that gives bad karma. Two, you are comparing yourself to someone else that's either already put a lot of work in, or they're ready, or it's just their time. But for me, like, if I'm close to someone that's shining, then I feel like I'm doing well too. I feel like we made it, you know?
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. What about you, Brandon?
Yeah, first, I think both of those are really good points that you guys made. I actually am going to take a page off of what you said don't do. It's a marathon and not a sprint. And what do I mean by this? So, people often, so there's a process to success, right? But even before I go there, here's what I would say. Um, we are unique. We're uniquely made, right? If you think about Ty, you think about Johan, you think about me. Each of us has a distinct personality, a distinct set of gifts and abilities. God placed in us to only be orchestrated in the earth this way one time. All of creation. We're the only people that's going to be able to do it. So if you look at yourself with that in mind, knowing that I'm the only person who can do what I'm put in here to do for my purpose, and whatever that is, you no longer compare yourself to anyone else's journey because nobody else has ever experienced your journey, and nobody else will ever experience their journey. The important thing to do is to focus on embracing and becoming more of who you are, maturing in that. There's beauty in growth. There's beauty. There's depths in yourself. There's gifts. There's abilities. The process is a thing of beauty. It's switching the perception because the more I grow, the more I delve into myself, the more I explore, the more of my abilities come forth. That doesn't happen without the journey. So I don't want just the end result because I miss out on the beauty of every gift, every ability, every ounce of wisdom that I'm going to pick up along this train. I need every moment. I need all of that in order to accomplish the things that are in me to do. You see what I'm saying? So what people have to do is to embrace the process and realize that each stage should be celebrated as a form of success. Don't look at the end in mind. Start celebrating the incremental growth, the little steps, the small things. And then that way we build up much more gratitude, much more excitement about our process. And before we know it, we arrive at where we want to be. But we've enjoyed that journey much more than saying, oh man, this person, they're here and in 10 years, it doesn't matter what they're doing. Like, because what if I'm comparing myself to somebody who has half of my potential? I'm cheating myself. They can't be my goal. Like, I have to be the goal, and my purpose has to be an inspiration. And I'm not saying that you don't have mentors and et cetera, because we all learn from so many people. But the more that we focus on us as the focal point and our abilities, it makes that process so much better, and it untaps and uncovers so much of our potential and we're able to do things that we can never imagine. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, those are all a good point, man. I just want to piggyback on what you guys were saying because I think it's like it's easy to like we always say like comparison is a thief of joy, right?
Hmm.
And because comparison is a thief of joy, most of the youth around us are spending their grade school looking up to athletes or looking up to entertainers. So by the time they get into the space of college and all the stuff and building a life for their own, half the time they don't think that being a 15-year high school principal with a family and a nice house in a suburb involved in your community is also a successful life, right? For them is like, I got to make it to the league. I got to do something. And what we end up doing is we end up creating concept in our head that's just creating more pressure on us for no reason at all. So and like Ty said, it's just like a 401k. All you just got to do is pay it back towards yourself, and as time continues to grow, you'll see that you continue to grow within the identity that you want to build for yourself. But it's very important to know who you want to be, right? Because you end up spending 5-10 years struggling trying to be like Brandon when your personality or your identity is like me, right? So I think that's like very important, but at the same time, we can't really say much without people actually going out there and seeking those resources. And what it takes is really that moment that Ty had, or I had that moment too, where I was like, man, I don't think I'm going to just like, because where I come from, my neighborhood, like 5 out of 100 people can make it where I'm at today. And I say five because when I use 100 guys that came from where I came from, out of 100 guys from my neighborhood, only five made it where I'm at today. That's why I know that number so well. And for me, it's like when you know things like that, it's because at that moment I had to tell myself I didn't want to be like the other 95. I had to do something about my life, you know. So it really take that moment where you like, I want better for me, and then you start looking up to the people that you really want to be like. This is it. I think you're on mute, man. Yeah, we can't hear you.
Who, Ty?
Yeah, Ty is back now. Yeah, we can't hear Ty.
Ty, you on Ty probably on like two different lives. He got
No,
there you go.
but
I heard a no.
now,
Yeah, we hear you now.
yeah. So I was gonna say like, it's really not much to say. After that, you guys have any closing words? Any last words?
No, he shut down the shop.
Yeah.
No,
So
man,
like,
I appreciate this. This
mm,
this was a great opportunity for us to like, share from our perspective. I think that the more we start looking up to people that look like us, the less, the more we have people that look like us that are growing around us.
yeah.
So role models look like you guys, man. And I think that more young people should realize that our role models are like the ones of us that are essentially build the life that we want,
Mhm.
because LeBron James is like an example in so many, and a lot of the kids out there are struggling because they want to be like LeBron, they want to be like Steph, or I don't know, Jay-Z, but like those are only a few, So
Mhm.
don't put too much pressure on yourself. Celebrate your small victories, talk to your elders, and really know yourself. And it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to cry, it's okay to express yourself. And guess what? There's a lot of people out here that love you. And I'm just talking to whatever young person who's out here watching us who's struggling with suicidal thoughts or identity crisis. But that's all for me, y'all.
Yo, those is gonna be my my thoughts exactly. Thank you so much, Brandon and Johan, for joining me. Thank you for everyone in the audience that's joining me. Anyone that is listening to this now or in the future, I'm hoping that you can take something from it, learn from it, help yourself, help someone else. We'll be back here next week. Kiki gave us a really good topic, and I think we're going to focus on the stress of being the conduit for generational wealth of your family.
Ooh, Lord.
Yeah, I'll be here. I'll be here for that. I'm gonna be here for that.
Ooh,
Yes. So
man.
I know it's going to be a great conversation. We might need 2-3 parts, you know.
Yeah,
So
this is serious. You need to do a series on
yeah,
that, brother.
yeah. So
I'm
we're gonna
gonna be on. I'm gonna be on for that for sure.
for,
Jesus.
sh- for sure, for sure. We're gonna close out right now. Thank you all for joining me. I am immediately going to Jay Sean Durham's channel to do the Sean Show. I just posted a link for anyone that wanted to join me. And then also, if you're following me on IG after the Sean Show, we're gonna most likely be on IG Live afterwards for our normal Wednesday. Uh, I don't want to call it the after dark, but the mental health conversations do take a lot out of us. So normally Wednesday nights on IG, we grab a drink and then we just chat it up. All right. So
All
thank
right,
you all
man.
for joining me. I'll see you all soon.
Take it
Have
easy,
a great
bro.
day.